and his brothers. His son.
It's not like a vending machine.
There's a,
I know it's like full bar, just has a lot.
yeah, there's a soda, I mean, there's a soda fountain up there.
Okay.
In that kitchen we walked by?
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't advertise it, but go discreetly.
Yeah.
It's for members only.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Come back here, James.
It's all right. We'll get one. One person will be all right.
One ill-consumed soda puts the entire Capitol factory out of business.
AustinRB, December. Now that they're just getting loose, because when AustinRB used to be upstairs, be able to do the separation from mine. We're out, I mean, it's pretty much becoming the same, which is why we just need like different names just because, but, yeah. Just more frequent, away from what come together this morning. Now,
I got charged. Monday meetings.
that happens every 2 weeks. Yeah, most, I mean, if you don't see me on that 2 week period, you don't notice it, but it typically happens.
This is the first number.
Every time I see you.
Actually, they decided to do
Probably
that
seeing on the off.
company-wide academic works at one point.
Yeah, I do it at home myself.
Put it in like reports, whatever.
So, so much to do it more frequently.
I like that. Are they continuing with this? What? Are they continuing with it?
Well, I think product might.
Yeah.
I can't go for.
Product, as Gary said, that needs to be done.
Try to buzz me once. Yeah. Give it a try.
How is it?
Yeah, sure.
I tried the bus stop once, and I never.
So board isn't even allowed to have meetings.
And that was 30 years old.
They just have to like distribute everything like knowledge bases and stuff because we can't all be off the phones at the same time. Like, you know, or we
What?
30 minutes.
I wanted to be white before I was born. Well, because
You want to go Steve Martin style?
so, like,
Okay.
my father was like salt and pepper,
Right.
which in his
Doesn't that look
20s.
okay?
You just looked a little like,
So I just wanted that look. Like everybody called him like Uncle.
I'm not sure if that's better.
Yeah, that's more.
Right. Even though like he
We
was
see a
like
picture of Will
people would be older than him and they think like people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's.
There's a little scallop going on there.
It's not a great look. He's blue from head to
I didn't see the picture of Will Smith blue.
Military checkpoints around like city borders, all that stuff, and he would
Although,
just be
now that
like,
I realize, I've only seen it on Twitter, so that might have been.
Yeah, that might have been unified.
So it was just like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
When I think of the.
Pretty sure this is like a screen cap from a trailer.
Really?
so like, like,
Oh, man.
it's work, it's
not as bad as like,
but
Masonic
our,
that came out.
so our paternal uncles, and also any random,
With him in it, or?
But no,
Yeah.
just like the
and
character.
Nice quads, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely didn't skip that game.
Yeah, something like that. Sir, man.
Typically, you would use sir when you're talking to someone older or something like that. Position of authority.
Yeah, but like, I think of my mom or dad.
I totally forgot about President's Day.
We would use.
Oh, yeah.
I saw yours.
Yeah, I was very happy about
I'm actually taking off Friday, so I'm doing nothing. I'm gonna see how many of those 4 days I cannot leave the house. I mean, go in the backyard, but like,
Yeah, right, that doesn't count.
eventually, but.
That's when.
I used to always get stir crazy when I couldn't stay at home, and now I'm like at a different point in my life, and I'm like, I'm totally cool staying in my house.
I need to leave the house at least once. Otherwise,
I could spend 2 or 3 solid days at home before I feel the need to go be social.
You know, give me a day to like grab some groceries first. Although, I mean, having the occasional time to run out and go grab something, it's not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more like,
But you don't even have to do that anymore, you can just get it delivered.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really insistent about staying at home.
Yeah, I've done the grocery delivery stuff, but I don't know. I like being able to like pick up produce. Sometimes produce that I get, it's like, plus that's a fun way to like go be spontaneous and buy stuff at the grocery store I wouldn't normally buy. Like, ooh, that looks tasty.
that sounds interesting, like, put that.
I love to go yesterday.
Yeah, I actually really like it. I don't like going at like 2 o'clock on a Sunday.
I hate grocery
Wait, what's the name?
That's like my least favorite. It's packed. But when it's like empty grocery store, I'm like a kid in a candy store.
Early morning on Sunday.
Sometimes you do something like that.
Yeah, I would.
Except you can't buy out.
Yeah, that has been me before.
When I first got back from college, I was going to a friend's party. I was like, oh, pick up a handle of, something cheap. Oh, yeah, we'll stop at the gas station that's right around the corner.
No,
But I have to, it was like,
I would go to like the local 7-Eleven and bought,
birthday card.
liquor all
You
the
can buy
time.
liquor at the 7-Eleven.
right,
How long did this?
I primarily bought from the Walgreens. I was in across the street from campus. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's just this one. Go to a, not a convenience store. I went to a drugstore, like, they don't have either. Like, great.
I have a sample of like that way for me to figure out the date.
I go separately.
All right, I'm gonna go get a 12-pack.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's because I got a lot of checks.
And Pennsylvania, you have to go to the state store to buy.
That's why I was like,
Yeah.
The state runs.
And my sister,
yeah, I
Got
didn't,
into
we didn't
craft
have
beer.
so that's why I like.
when she was in graduate school in Utah,
You can
because
actually.
all the rest of the beer is like the 3% or whatever, or the 2 point whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And except small craft breweries could like make full strength beer. So they are really into craft beer because like of the laws trying to get people to drink less. Yeah,
Sounds
it was like totally reversed.
Right, right.
It sounds more like being everybody.
I left Leah know that she wasn't feeling well.
Yeah, she told me something, but also has like a
screen.
I had something up, yeah, anyway.
Oh, you had something up. Oh. Well, I'm sorry to say.
These people.
I think it actually had reverted to the airplane thing.
Did it?
Yeah, I saw like some generic AustinRB thing. Oh, maybe that was you.
That wasn't me. The generic AustinRB thing is me.
My apologies.
It's alright, you're forgiven. Alright, we're about to hit full mass, so we can start in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
You can go outside and there's a big fan. Are you still in the phase where you're going to sleep or? Plans for dinner? Did you take a break before? You take them together or just like? With your wife, I guess. I know some people like, one person takes it to the other person takes it to the other. Yeah. Yeah, family around here, that helps. Yeah. Okay. I have another uncle that lives in and it's just to have parents find daycare. So learning all about that mess and how to hold it. That's the first thing.
Do you know the Wi-Fi?
Already?
What's up?
Do you know the Wi-Fi?
It should just be
It's like a guess.
Capital Factory guests, and then you just input your email address or a email address.
Cool. Thank you.
And I assume something close to your house.
Ever use them? they listen to it on the stereo. I'm gonna be like 99% certain.
Where chip on it has like least likelihood is that makes doing things like supposedly I'm supposed to be able to set up for this phone. I have no phone here. And like I can basically unlock everything. Like unlock it from my phone. Whereas now I have to like type in the 6-digit PIN to get that.
I'll have to.
There's another, because there is a switch down here. It was originally, it's technically, it already does not do that anymore, but it uses for like some of those audio measurements and like actual work. It's kind of a big funky thing, they're like, so I just want to sit on the couch and serve.
Yeah, I correct.
And I think I have to buy another Mac. It broke our last one, and I need a personal project.
Ready? All right, this is the quietest room I've ever seen of people more than 10 all at once. I hope you all been talking, not just waiting. If you're here for AustinRB, you're in the right place. If not, you're still welcome to have some food, but you might want to go find the actual room you're supposed to be in. My name is Yusuf, I'm your host. First things first, thank you to our sponsors, Win Fuse.
Yeah, so I'm Alexander Clark from the lead dev at Win Fuse. We are hiring right now. We're looking for at least 2 people who have like done a year or 2 plus of work on a production application. So that's you. You're interested in being part of a growing team at an established company, kind of shaping the culture as the thing grows. Talk to me. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Alexander, and yes, great guy, good to work with. So please talk to him whenever you can, if you're interested. They'll be our sponsor for a couple of these events, so I assume you'll be around for more of these.
Definitely. Some will be.
Some. Also, thank you to Capital Factory for sponsoring the place, as usual. They also can get a clap from you, eventually, maybe. And Bear and Giraffe, which is my company, sponsors the meetup. We don't need a clap. There is a code of contact. It's on the meetup page. The gist of it, please be nice and please be welcoming. If for any reason you feel that that's not the case for you, please come talk to me and we'll get it sorted. Quick links, AustinRB will take you directly to the meetup page. I keep forgetting to, we moved Slack to refresh Austin. Potentially I should just update this right now, because I'll forget. Is it refresh or refresh Austin? Does anybody know? I think.
Refresh Austin.
One word.
What did I write? Huh?
What?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought somebody was correcting me. What
Refresh
happened?
Austin, one
That
word.
looks great.
Yes.
You did it right.
We are also on Twitter, AustinRB. So if you need to get added to the Refresh Austin Slack, you should be able to from that. Otherwise, just tweet at us and we'll send you a link. Also, Justin in the back, wave, Justin, is also one of the organizers. So if you need anything and I'm not available, he is. I don't have any announcements other than we're here, we're looking for sponsors and speakers for the future month. Anybody else has any announcements community-wise, Ruby-related conferences, meetups, anything you'd like to bring up? Nope. All right, move on. Parking. Until somebody corrects me, parking is free. It's after 6 on Mondays and Tuesdays. So if you can find a spot, try to grab one. Otherwise, Capital Factory does provide validation if you park in this building. So see somebody at the front desk for that. Intros. Start. How many of you are here for the first time? Great, awesome. Good to see everybody here. So we'll do quick intros. And for my always in the hunt for some punny icebreaker I came up with, is Valentine's Day is a consumer exploit or a celebration of love? Please provide your answer. And I'll start. My name is Yusuf. I run a company called Bear and Giraffe. We're a software development agency here in Austin. We do web development for startups and small businesses. Not looking to hire at the moment. If we suddenly get a new client, I might. My icebreaker is I fall under it's not a celebration of love. So you interpret that however you want. We'll start this way.
Okay. I'm Kelsey. I work at Pingboard. We're not hiring, unfortunately, and I'm not looking. And I think Valentine's Day is a celebration of love, but not just romantic love.
Okay.
I'm Catherine. I work at Blackpod. I'm the team formerly known as Academic Works, but we got acquired. We are not currently hiring on our team. I think there are possibly some jobs open at Blackpod in sales, but I don't think anything currently in Austin in engineering. I am totally Valentine's Day is a consumer exploit. Like that is.
I'm James Buckley. I'm also at Blackball as an engineer. Yeah, I'm not looking. My boss is right there. And I'm going to say, yeah, it's a consumer exploit. It was originally co-opted from a Roman orgy festival, so greeting card companies cleaned it up.
My name is Darnie. I work with them, and I'm not looking. And I think it's a consumer exploit also.
Wow, we're growing. Okay, good.
Cynical.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ann. I work at Omremed, which is out of Ohio. So I am remote. They may be hiring, sometimes they're hiring. They're just a little bit shit. Icebreaker, consumer exploit one, yeah. But do I care? I don't know. I like chocolate.
Good. It's a celebration of love for chocolate,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Josh. I work at a company called Procore. We're hiring aggressively as of last week, so all types of positions, levels. If you're interested in knowing more, talk to me later, or don't talk to
Austin
me.
as well.
In Austin, so we outgrew
Steps in Austin.
Rails devs, security, DevOps, everything. We outgrew CARP. I don't know if you know what CARP is, but it's like a small, tiny town of like 1,000 people, of which half are our company. So
Yes.
yeah, we're looking to grow in Austin now. But I transferred over there to kind of help grow our culture because our culture is very specific, and that's what we're kind of known for. So we want to make sure we still maintain that culture. But yeah, we're nice people. Some of us are extremely, or a lot of us are extremely talented, but we're also very big on growth. So any level of experience, we're there to kind of nurture you into that level. But icebreaker, I want to say a little bit of both. There's so many different shapes and sizes of people that it's however you take it really and whatever you believe in.
We'll accept that as an answer.
My name's Matt, and I work for Enterprise. And icebreaker. I mean, I just got in a big dispute with a friend of mine today about this. And I came up with a really good metaphor, I think, is that romance is to Valentine's Day as spirituality is to religion.
Interesting.
So
I read your mind, so
yeah.
I do that. It's a hidden talent. You said you work at NPR?
Yeah, I do a lot of work for WNYC and radio.
Okay. Do Ruby work for that?
Well, I'm doing a project for co-op now that's in Rails and Ember, but I do mostly Ember stuff for WNYC.
Good to know. Just good to know who's around, who's here, who's in town, what they're doing. Thank you.
My name is also Jeff. I work at URB. Our office is 2 blocks north of here at 9 Sand Dragon. I am not looking, I am hiring. We have a lot of Ruby on Rails and a lot of Node in our tech stacks. We have 8 open roles, 2 of which are specific to Ruby that I'm the hiring manager for. So if you said you're looking, find me. Icebreaker, definitely consumer exploit, but I do resonate with chocolate. So.
My name is Sarah. I work at Bear Interact with Lucid. I am not hiring nor looking. And now, man, I wish I would be unique right now, but I really do believe it is a consumer's ploy. So I'm just kind of stick with the general consensus and the room of skeptics, apparently.
There's something weird about the consensus about this here. I don't know. We need to find a romantic somewhere among us.
Another example, for 3 years, as previously mentioned, we are hiring. I'm going to say it was a speculative endeavor by the emoji industrial complex. With lots and lots of hard emojis. More than any other songs.
I like it.
I'm John Ariano. I work at Power School with Justin here. We're probably hiring. I'm not sure. I'm not looking. And I'm romantic. It's a celebration of love.
I'm Justin. I work at Power School. We are hiring, as far as I know, doubling the team size. So we're a rail shop. I'm currently looking, and while I don't celebrate Valentine's Day, I do celebrate the day after Valentine's Day when you can get chocolate for half.
Nice.
Mike, I work for a company called Pensa Systems. That if you follow some of the startup news, you may have heard of us because we've just got a $5 million investment.
Congrats.
Yeah, and I mostly do JavaScript these days. I don't do much Ruby anymore. But I'm also a Vue.js evangelist, so if you use React and Angular on your front end and you're really frustrated with it, I definitely recommend Vue.js. And as far as consumer exploit or celebration, I lean more towards the ploy, but I've also been divorced, so I think I might be biased.
Well, my name is Yo Ichiro, and Yo, like greetings. That is well, the way I prefer to be called. And I'm from Japan, and my English is not good enough. But anyway, I've been using Ruby for quite a long time, like 10 years or so. But I've been always a casual user, always a learner. But well, my love over Ruby is really, really big. So probably this occasion is my opportunity to confess my love to Ruby. And, well, one other thing is, well, I'm learning a lot about American culture. I came here last August, last year. And well, my family, 2 daughters, my wife, and we are learning a lot about American culture. By the way, I am here to be a research visitor at UT. I'm actually working at the university in Japan. And well, 1 year visit and halfway to the end. And well, what I was female to male. So that was a surprise.
Oh, interesting.
That's it.
Good to know.
My name's Dylan. I'm currently looking, and the icebreaker, I think, it started out as a celebration of love, but like anything, it got corrupted into a money-making consumer. So, somewhere between.
My name's Coy. I also work at Blackbod. Valentine's Day. Sounds like I really like Japanese Valentine's Day.
All right. I assume you have an intro slide in your talk, or do you?
I do not.
You do not? So
No.
go ahead and introduce yourself then.
Hi guys, my name is Scott. I also work at Blackbot with Catherine, James, Darney, and Coy. I am not hiring. I'm not looking, but my boss is here tonight, so if it doesn't go well, that might change. And then icebreaker, is Valentine's Day a consumer's ploy or a celebration of love? I'm just going to say yes to that question.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cop-out.
Yeah. Hedging.
Well, thank you all for coming. Next, we have Scott, who's up here, to give us a study about building Sudoku puzzle solver in Ruby. I am mad at the dozen or so people who sign up and never noticed the typo here. Anyways, just joking. Quick note before Scott begins. Austin on Rails is on the 26th, so the fourth Tuesday of the month. We are looking to do a panel on ethics and choice of workplace. Title still being worked on. That came up out of the conversation today on Slack. Good conversation. Currently we have like 3 or 4 men on the panel, looking for more diversity of that. So if you have strong opinions about said topic, please come talk to me, and maybe you can take my spot on the panel. So otherwise, take it, Scott.
All right. How's everyone doing today? Good. So before I begin, show of hands, how many people have built a Sudoku solver in Ruby or another programming language? All right, so I've got one person that I've got to like be real with. Otherwise, I was just gonna sell this by the seat of my pants. But all right, so I first got this idea of working on a Sudoku solver when I was flying home for Christmas. I was on my plane and I was like working on a Sudoku game just during the flight, and I thought, man, like this is a really interesting problem. This would be a really interesting thing to try to build in Ruby. And so I sat down and I tried to think through just organically, without looking at a textbook or a blog post or anything else, how would one go about solving a Sudoku puzzle? And what I discovered was it's a really interesting technical problem to solve, because in most cases, just brute forcing a solution isn't going to work 99% of the time. And throughout the course of this talk, we'll see why. The reason why I wanted to give a talk on it was, as I dug into this problem, I realized that it's also a really nicely sized problem. So it's a little complex, but not so much that it can't be discussed over a single talk. We're not going to be digging into a production level Rails app or anything like that, for example. So to begin, show of hands, how many people have solved a Sudoku puzzle in real life before? Cool. All right, so this is familiar to most, but for those who are uninitiated, Sudoku is a game that's typically played on a 9x9 board, and the rules are pretty simple. So you have to fill the entire board with digits 1 to 9. So 7, 8, 9, and you want to go down as well. So 5, 7, 9, 2, 4, 6. This is where it gets tricky. And 8. And so on and so forth. So the goal of the game, there are really 3 simple rules. At the end of a completed Sudoku puzzle, you will have used each digit 1 through 9 once for every single row, every single column, and every single group. And a group simply is a 3x3 section across each board. So like the digit 1 will appear maybe here, here, and here. But if you were to put 1 here as well, that would be invalid because A, it already appears in a column and it already appears in a group. So those 2 would not work. Does that make sense? Cool. So as we dig into the logic of the board and the cell and the group, we'll see how we will make decisions based on, or how, like, which numbers we want to put into our board. So we'll start out with, looking at the cell. So a cell is just an individual, just one place that receives a number. So this guy right here is a cell. And any cell can receive any digit 1 through 9. But in order for it to be a valid Sudoku solution, like I said, it's got to meet the validation requirements with all of its neighboring cells. So it can't have the same digit across row, column, or group. So the cell is a pretty simple object. When we initialize it, it's got a name, and that name is going to correspond, in our case, to the position on the board. So the way that this solver works is this first cell is going to be cell 1, 1, and then the bottom cell is going to be cell 9 and 9. So that's going to be its name, and it's got a number attribute as well, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's also got a groups array, and as we'll see in a moment, the groups array simply stores all of the different groups that a particular cell belongs to. Since each cell matters to 3 groups, there are always going to be 3 groups that we're going to be inspecting when we go to decide which numbers go into that cell. So it'll be a row group, a column group, and a group group. So we've got some just basic helper methods. We look to see, is the cell assigned? We look to see what the available numbers are. So if it has a number, it's just going to return an empty set. Else, it's going to return we've got a constant set here that just determines a set 1 through 9, and it's going to return the not the union, but the difference between what's already in the group and what all the numbers that are available to put in. Then we've got this cell join method, which is just going to add a group to the groups that the cell contains. We've got a 2S method and an inspect. So pretty straightforward. We'll revisit this cell class as we dig more into the group and the board. So like I said, cells are organized into groups. Each group consists of 9 cells where the numbers are assigned to a cell and must be unique within a group. So groups are able to report the current set of assigned numbers within the group. So when we initialize a group, it's got an empty array of cells. We start shoveling cells into the various groups. And this is where we call that cell join method that establishes the relationship between individual cells and the groups that they belong to. So we're going to have a, whoops. So we're going to have a group that looks like this. We're going to have a So we're going to have a columns group and then just a 3x3 group as well. And we're going to repeat that pattern for the entire board until all cells know about all of their groups. And we've got a set of helpers. This numbers method simply returns all of the numbers that have been assigned to a particular group. So in this case, like if we were to look at this row group right here, it would just return all digits 1 through 9 because all numbers or all cells in this group have been defined. But if we were to call numbers in this group, it would return empty because nothing's been defined yet. Make sense? Same thing, open numbers is kind of the opposite. It's just returning available numbers for a particular group. Then we have a cells open for method, which just returns cells that have not been set yet. And then we've got an open cells map, and that's pretty much it on our group logic. So this will, when we start jumping into the various strategies, this is really going to come in handy as far as determining which numbers go where. Cool. And then finally, the board is the beefy class. This guy's got a lot. But basically, we define a set of errors that we'll use. We've got a couple of reader attributes, cells, and groups. And then we have this new item called strategies. And strategies kind of make up the decision-making process for how we're actually going to solve this puzzle. And in my opinion, it's the most interesting aspect of what we're actually trying to do. So most of the code that we've looked at up to this point just kind of defines the rules of the game as we already know it. The strategies are going to help us actually decide where to actually put the numbers. So when we initialize, verbose is simply an option that we can pass via the command line. We initialize all of the cells, so that just creates a bunch of cells that we've already looked at. And then we define our groups, and the group definition method simply defines all the different permutations for what we're going to be looking for as we try to determine the availability of numbers and empty cells within our groups. Cool. Any questions so far? I'm kind of blowing through this.
Wait, what was the letters?
Yeah, what were the letters?
Sure. So define grouping. So here we go. When we have so define groups calls 3 separate methods. It defines, we have a define rows, define columns, and define blocks. So basically what this is doing is, this is calling a method called define groupings, which is just creating a set of groups specified by this 9x9 string stored in these rows. So each position in the string represents a cell on the grid. Each character value in the string represents a group. All cell positions with the same character will be put into the same group. So if we want to dig into this a little deeper, we'll define a local groups, create a new hash, and within that we will define a new group using these the hash keys and values that we define in these various strings. The group IDs, we just split those strings, the cells. We iterate through each of those. We define the group ID using shift, and we skip it if that does not match that pattern, and that returns our groups. We can drop a pry in and see what that returns.
Why wouldn't it match that pattern if they're all letters?
What's that?
That pattern right there. Can you go up again? Yeah, why wouldn't it ever match one?
It should. So the way that this was written, it was written to allow extensibility if you wanted to create custom puzzles, if you wanted to do something outside of the realm of just the traditional 9x9 grid. Like if you wanted to do I don't know, a 15x15 or something like that. This was just, that was just a basic constraint that was added. Cool. All right, so that's kind of the board at a high level. Now we get into our various strategies. And what I really liked about this the Sudoku solver was that it uses a set of 3 strategies in a really interesting way that is about as efficient as you can get for this type of implementation, but also is pretty clear and concise in the way that it's designed. So, like I was saying earlier, if we wanted to, theoretically, we could just fill every single cell on the board with a random number and then test it for its validity and just repeat that process until the board is eventually solved. That would be incredibly expensive and time consuming because we would have to iterate through thousands, if not millions of options to get to the final solution that we're looking for. Using these 3 strategies in concert allows us to solve for the really easy cases, the digits that we know are going to exist based on the basic logic that Sudoku requires us to have. And then from there we can implement the more complex backtracking logic that allows us to sometimes guess and make a mistake and recover gracefully instead of making an incorrect guess and having the solution bomb out. Cool. So the solution strategy is kind of the parent strategy class. It just defines, it takes a board and sets an assignments variable. Statistics is just used for output, pretty basic. So is say. The assign method is where we actually put a number that we've determined is valid for a given cell and we put it on that cell. And we provide a little output there as well. And then for each strategy, we inherit from the parent strategy class. The cell strategy is by far the simplest strategy that's available to us. Basically, it says that if any cell has only one possible number that may be assigned to it, assign that number. So in our example, the cell strategy will look at every single cell and it'll ask once it gets to this cell right here, it'll see, well, there's only one possible solution that this cell could be because all 8 other digits have been taken. So we don't even need to make a guess as to what this is going to be. We know with certainty, assuming that all these other values are true, that this is going to be 9. Right? That's all that the cell strategy does. So we iterate through each cell. We retrieve the available numbers for a particular cell. If we know that there's only one available answer, we assign that answer. The group strategy. So for the group strategy, if there's within a group, there's a number that can only be assigned to a single cell, assign that number to the cell. So this is slightly different as opposed to using the basic cell strategy. The group strategy really comes into play for the blocks. So like this example up here, if we had like 8, 6, 4, looking at this solution and this block, even though we can't see necessarily across the entire row or the entire column, we know that we have to use each digit 1 through 9 for a particular block. We know that this has to be a 9. So that's the essence of the group strategy. So at this point, we're going to run through a couple of Sudoku puzzles, and we're going to see kind of how these two strategies work together. And hopefully. steps in progress. So the puzzles that we'll be using are these simple string, they're just a custom like Sudoku file. Periods represent empty values, and it's just a 9x9, it's a 9x9 string that encodes the various characters that are available when we start. So this is what our sample input looks like. And just for giggles, I'm gonna turn off the backtracking strategy, because the backtracking strategy is a little more complicated, and I want to dig into that separately. So at this point, we're just going to try to solve this puzzle using nothing but the cell strategy and the group strategy. So as we can see, it worked pretty well for a while, but then at a certain point, it bombs out. And the reason why it bombs out is because this puzzle in particular is not able to be solved purely using the cell strategy and the group strategy. The reason being is because at some point we have to make a guess and we have to run with that guess and see if it gets us to the end. And the cell strategy and the group strategy don't give us the flexibility to guess. They only make decisions for cells that we know for certain have a certain value.
What was the percentage of that?
What's that?
So your first two methods, what does it eliminate down for you?
That's a good question. I don't have good output.
Can't you just look at what you had before?
Sure.
Matrix and then what you have after? It's back to napkin, not like.
Yeah, so it made 19 assignments, so
There you go. How many empty were there?
There are 25 full, so 81 minus 25.
math is hard. 60.
56, so there were 56 empty, and then you assigned 19 of the 56?
That sounds right.
It's about a third.
Yeah. So we got about a third of the way there. Yeah. So in order to get through this entire puzzle, we've got to be able to make a guess, and hopefully that guess works out for us, which is where the backtracking strategy kind of comes into play. So backtracking allows us to do a couple things, and this is the piece of the algorithm that is going to allow us to get to a final solution for any valid Sudoku puzzle. So the backtracking strategy does a few things. It calculates all of the possible options for a given cell. It also allows us to store the state of the board at that particular moment, because in case we make a guess and we get down later into the puzzle and we find that the puzzle is wrong, we have to go back to that point in time and use an alternative. So backtracking is going to take the board state at that given moment, wipe it back to that moment in time, and start over. So again, it's going to iterate through as long as the board is not stuck. It's going to find a candidate for guessing, and we're going to guess for our candidates based on the fewest number of available numbers. So ideally, we want to start guessing with values that have, just one or two alternatives, as opposed to like starting here where, the whole thing is fair game. That's going to take a lot longer to iterate through than, trying to guess this guy right here where there are only two alternatives. So once it finds a candidate for guessing, it's going to return that cell. And then at that moment, it's going to call remember alternatives, which is where we actually take the state of the board and we push it into the alternatives variable, which encodes the board. It takes the cell and the actual answer. So once we've done that, we've got a little output that will allow us to see what the alternative stack looks like. So as we progress further throughout the puzzle, we'll see potential alternative answers being appended to that string, and whenever the puzzle determines that, hey, you know, we've made a wrong determination based on what we're seeing, it'll pop a guess off of that alternative stack and use that. So and it'll be a good little visual way to see how that all works. And then we call guess, which guess simply pulls the top value off of alternatives and parses the board at that particular state, and then assigns the number that was part of that alternative right there. We then have some output that allows us to see how many other options we have left, and so on and so forth. And then, so in this case, I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to enable the backtracking strategy, and I'm going to disable the other two. Whoops.
Is there a reason you named it evil?
No, there's not. That was just, that was the one that seems most fun. Right there. So as we can see, this is taking a little bit of time. So this took 177 assignments to actually get through. It backtracked quite a bit, but as we can see, it ultimately did get to the final solution. So the backtracking strategy alone is enough to get us to a completed Sudoku puzzle, but it's not necessarily the most efficient way to go about it, because by not knocking down some of the really easy values that the cell strategy or the group strategy can provide, the backtracking strategy has to guess a lot. It's got a lot of alternatives it needs to churn through.
Have you tried running just the backtracking one to see how terrible it is?
Yeah, that's what I just did actually.
Oh, just now?
Yeah. So this was just the backtracking strategy. Okay. So it made 177 assignments. If we look through the cell strategy and group strategy combined, this number should go down a fair amount. So you can also see here, it lists the strategy that it went through. So in this case, we went through 56 total assignments. That was a fraction of, it was a third of what it took us to go through.
It was 18 seconds, now 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there is a sleep in here, but yeah, Ruby's a little bit faster than this, but there's the most visually appealing. So going with the cell strategy and the group strategy first, and then when all those options are exhausted, then employing the backtracking strategy to make a guess and get us to the finish line. And in our case, we didn't even need to backtrack at all. This puzzle was solved on the first guess that it made. It didn't need to go back in time and reset it all. But because it was able to make the guess and run through the finish, that's why we actually have a completed puzzle, even though we didn't need to backtrack.
Does the assignments thing, that means you only had to do the backtracking once?
This guy right here, max alternatives?
No, the assignment?
So the assignments, that's just the number of times that strategy was employed to pick a number. That's all that means. So there's only one value on the board that was picked using the backtracking strategy. Every other one was picked using the cell strategy or the group strategy.
So can you run another example just to compare the two?
Sure.
Scott, I'm sorry.
Yep, sure.
So after the cell strategy and group strategy, there was only one that was missing?
What's that?
After the cell strategy and group strategy, there was only one that was missing?
Not exactly. So what the difference was, when employing just the cell strategy and the group strategy, those strategies only determine values with absolute certainty. It'll only pick a number where it knows with 100% certainty that this is going to be a 9. Like there's no possibility that this value in cell 1-9 could be a 2 or a 4. It's got to be a 9. But backtracking allows us to say, oh, well, we've got two different possibilities in this first block. Backtracking is able to say, well, I'm going to make this a 6, and hopefully this gets us to the finish line. Versus the cell strategy, the group strategy, which wouldn't guess at all. It wouldn't want to make that determination. It would look at this and say, I don't know what to do. I don't. Give it to somebody else.
Let me phrase it another way.
Sure.
Like after the cell and group strategy, you had several squares that were still empty.
Correct.
And so the backtrack strategy, it made a guess in those empty squares, and
Correct.
then you only had to do it once, and then it.
Correct. So and this gets us to the last bit of code that we haven't looked at yet, which actually runs all this stuff. So when we're solving for the board, and actually it for the most part lives in board, but so when we call the solve method, we call board.solve, and board.solve for after it picks a number, it resets the strategies that it wants to use. And let me find that code.
So essentially, once it's made a guess, it continues to temporarily assume that its guess is correct and run the group and cell strategy.
Correct. Exactly. So the way that it works is once we've defined our strategies here, it's going to look. Let's see. Here we go. So it's going to call strategies.find, and for each strategy, it's going to call the solve method on each strategy. So we've got. You notice it. So it starts out with the cell strategy, and then we've got the group, and we've got the backtracking strategy. So once it makes for every value that's picked via cell, so like in this case, the cell strategy would be called. It says, oh, I know what this is. This is actually technically a group. So I kind of own my board. So here, the cell strategy will say, okay, well, there's only one possibility in this column that this could be. So this will be 3. And it's going to try to go through the entire board and find all possibilities that are solved simply by looking at what are all the neighbors for a particular row or column, right? And once it exhausts that, then it goes to the group strategy. And the group strategy is what goes through and says, okay, well, here I've only got one potential option available to me in this group. That's going to be an 8. And once it's exhausted all those options, if there's anything left, this is going to, well, shit. So for every available cell that is solved, it's going to basically call the strategies in this order. So it's going to look to see, can I solve this via the cell strategy? No. Can I solve via the group strategy? No. And once both of those are exhausted, then it's going to get to the backtracking strategy. And then once it calls the backtracking strategy, maybe we'll go back to this example where the first 2 strategies aren't capable of solving. That's when it's going to go in and make its guess. And it's going to say, oh, this will be a 6. And then once it does that, the whole thing resets, or the call stack of the strategies resets. It's going to try to call the cell strategy again. And it's going to go through that process, and then it's going to go back through the group strategy. But this time, because we've made a guess, the board is in a more advanced state. We've got more numbers on the board. Now, the group strategy is able to take care of this last value.
That's cascaded down, that's what you
What's that?
That cascaded down, that's why you only have one backtrack.
Right.
How you lucky or how you design your tests.
Right, right.
You're always pulling the top, the lowest number off the top of your stack for guessing. How does your algorithm work? It just starts at the top right?
Yeah,
It starts at the top right and iterates over?
I believe that's the case. Yeah. So it's gonna pick the cell based on.
The choice of one or two, like the fewest.
Right, right.
And then after, but you choose those alternatives. You're gonna, if there's 4 cells that all have the exact same number of alternatives, it starts at your lowest iteration.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, and that's about it. I mean, we've got, so this statistics method, that just outputs the final little report. And yeah, so.
So if you give it a completely blank board at the beginning, does it's just gonna find a bunch of solutions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually don't have one of those.
Because the inputs that you gave it, is there only one solution to that?
So yeah, it's going to solve the puzzle deterministically. So it's not. That's a good question, actually. I'm not sure if this particular puzzle is.
I mean, technically, a Sudoku board is determined, can only have one solution.
Is that right?
Yeah, because the way the board starts is the board starts with all of them filled up, and you start taking out numbers until you can't anymore.
Right, but I'm wondering. But I guess the way I'm thinking about it is like if I had an empty board that, you know, say it just had like maybe the initial input was like 1, and then in the bottom corner 9.
That wouldn't be a solvable board.
What's that?
That wouldn't be a solvable board.
It would tell you the first solution that it finds now, it looks like.
Yes.
Right, because it would. So it would implement the backtracking strategy to just start making guesses until.
Right, but any actual guess would be valid if you only have.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, I think
you can go
Sudokus
up
are
to
supposed
17 solutions if you have enough empty spaces.
There should be, yeah. I think.
That's like when I was doing the kata, that's what it said.
Yeah. It should be.
It's just some math. I don't know. I'm not a math guy, but it's
Yeah, I'm not either.
there's some possibilities that once you remove enough cells, that there's multiple solutions and it starts going.
Right.
I mean, the ones they put in the newspaper only have one solution.
Exactly.
They publish the answer the next day.
Right. I mean, they only take out, you know,
Yeah.
maybe a third of the numbers on the table, if that, you know.
So did you start with your testing method? Did you start with a well-defined Sudoku and then test it?
So the initial implementation that I wrote, this is actually a solution that Jim Weirick wrote. The solution that I wrote initially, I implemented something. I realized that I got my backtracking algorithm wrong. I was incorrectly storing the state of the board, and that was causing issues for actually trying to go back in time and make guesses. So when I started looking around at alternatives, I saw his solution, and that was inspiring my solution pretty heavily to the point where I realized, like, man, like, this was much cleaner code anyway. It kind of solved my problem for me. So.
What about this code did you look like? Did it inspire something or teach you something about classes, Ruby code, you know, etc., whatever you name it?
So I learned quite a bit actually about the string board encoding and the way that he manages the state of the board. So, and I didn't want to get too deep into the parsing code because it was kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like utilitarian in that way. It's not really, let me find it. Yeah, so like, he does some interesting stuff with taking a board object and coding it to a string and then shoving it into the alternatives array for that like go back in time state solution for when you make a wrong guess and you need to refresh the board from a given point in history. I thought he did that in a really interesting way. So this parses the string, and that was a pretty interesting solution that I had totally not considered at all when I was trying to come up with my own solution to this problem. Yeah.
What do you think about the strategy implementation of passing in classes that then be called, and how he used that sort of pattern to say, hey, listen, you want to do something, I'll give you a class that does it, one or many.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that as a pattern in the code?
I mean, I think it works really well because it defines a standard way to interact with how you want to solve the board. So you've got your generic solution strategy that kind of contains the logic that all your child classes are going to need. Every strategy is going to need to assign, obviously. But then each individual child strategy actually defines its own solve method. So that provides a really nice way to navigate the board however you need to in order to get to the cells that you want to get to in order to place your values there, or look through your various groups and determine, hey, here are the groups that have only one possibility, or here are the groups that have many. Let me start with the lowest hanging fruit in this case, and then work my way up the chain that way. Do you guys have any other questions?
We looked at all into algorithms or methods for generating pseudocode by.
I'm sorry?
We looked at all into algorithms or methods for generating pseudocodes.
A little bit. And that kind of, like, are you talking about, like, starting from an empty board, filling that board, and then removing values selectively?
I'm thinking more along the lines of, I suppose that would be one strategy for generating, like, essentially like randomly creating boards with only one solution.
Right.
Whether that would, by whatever means that would.
For sure. For sure. I mean, it would be, it would be fairly straightforward to augment this logic to do something along those lines. Like, you already have all of your board, group, and cell access that you need to generate a board, and then selectively remove until you're comfortable with that. I have not looked specifically into doing that here, but I imagine I would use something very similar to the objects that are defined here in order to do something like that.
Presumably, what makes it a challenging puzzle is needing to use the backtrack strategy. Like a puzzle you can completely solve with the first two strategies would probably be considered pretty easy.
Correct.
Correct. The app I use, because I solve these puzzles every day, like many of them, and the app I use, I found that I've never had to use the backtrack strategy, and I didn't know it was a strategy until I heard it now, but it's sort of like I guessed it while I was doing it, is only the extreme ones need a guess, and then you go back, but I found that there was no way I can keep the state of the board in my head while doing that, so, but the hard, easy, or whatever medium don't need that at least in the apps that I've used. which is quite interesting.
So you're able to solve those just using the basic, like, what one digit's available in the group or one digit's available in a row, so on and so forth.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, there are hybrids of the two that you can think of as a person that might not be able, like you have to separate them
Oh, for sure.
as a program, but typically I think, at least I found that every single hard one I can do with just those two strategies,
Yeah.
or a hybrid of the two as I go along. But obviously also as a human, I don't need to go through every single cell and do the cell strategy and then go through the group strategy and then go, right? Like you can do it as you go.
Oh, for sure.
Right, so you can do it a little bit more in parallel and then the computer.
Right, I mean, you know, most humans aren't burning through Sudoku puzzles in 6 seconds, you know.
Right.
It's,
Right. My record is somewhere in the 2 minute and a half or something.
That's pretty darn good. I have not done that.
I'm trying to beat my record, I can't.
That's a pretty good record.
You may have explained this earlier, but that backtracking strategy, it can try something and then try the next thing and try the next thing and then backtrack all 3 steps if it doesn't work out? Or?
Correct. Yeah. So what it'll do is when it's determined that the backtracking strategy needs to be implemented, it knows, okay, like in this case, if we go back here. So these 2 cells will either be 7 or 8. And when it's determined that, you know, assuming like the rest of the board is in a fairly filled out state, we'll say, okay, the backtracking strategy needs to be implemented. We're gonna implement it in this cell right here. What it's gonna do is, in this alternatives array right here, it's going to shove an array into that array of the board at the moment that we're beginning the guessing. So it's gonna encode this entire board to a string. It's gonna take the cell position and it's going to take the number, and it's going to create an array to shove into that alternatives for every possibility. So we'll say, so for this case, it'll be like board string, which just has the state of the board at that particular moment. It's going to be cell 22, and it's going to be, we'll say, 7. And then at the same time, it'll also shove the other alternative, the other option at that moment, and it'll say board string, which is going to be at the exact same moment. It's going to be the exact same state. It's going to be board cell 22, and the value is going to be 8. And then when it makes a guess, it's going to pop an alternative off of the alternatives array, and then that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to use. And so this option is on the board, it is being used. Then as the board progresses, there's a method, I believe it's on the board object itself, that I believe it's stuck. Like if the board is not capable of progressing, like if for whatever reason, you know, an incorrect number was guessed and that's locking the puzzle from being able to be solved, that's when the board backtracks and it restores the board back to this state that we began guessing. And then instead of 7, because we already used this guess, it's a way we're going to pop again, and that's going to give us the other alternative, which was 8. And then it's going to shove the 8 in there, and it's going to try again. And then if it runs out of alternatives, the puzzle will fail, because if you backtrack and use up all of your alternatives and you don't get a valid puzzle, the puzzle itself is borked.
Scott, the group strategy, groups include rows and columns. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the group strategy can actually solve, like, if there's only one spot in a row that a number can go, not just one spot in a 3x3 square.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Or a column?
Right.
Okay, cool.
Then what's the difference between the cell strategy and the group strategy?
The cell strategy is saying there's only one number that can go in this square. And the group strategy is saying, maybe I have 3 empty spots in this group, but there's only one spot that 8 can go.
223.
2 minutes of break.
I just beat my record.
Nice.
Scott's talking spider.
Yeah.
Use the backtracking strategy.
Well, right on. Anybody else have any other questions? Right on. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's pretty.
Sorry, should have given you a warning.
Santa Barbara.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. We do have the room for another half an hour. So please mingle, finish the food. We're not gonna leave the lazy bastards here in Capital Factory any. Yes, mingle. If you're looking for a job, find those who are hiring. If you are hiring, for those who are looking. Otherwise, just talk and be social. And hopefully see you at the next time. If you're inspired to give a talk, please talk to me or Justin. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now the mandatory slide goes up.
So we're going to all the worlds.
Yeah, great.
That's probably a better.
What was the panel you were talking about that you're getting together?
Ollie put up a topic in the refresh Slack saying like, hey, would you, something along the lines like, would you work for Facebook, right? I'm simplifying a little bit, but
Yeah.
would you work for Facebook? You know, do you have ethical problems with that? Would that stop you from, or does that come in, factor into your decision to go for an employer or company that you work for or not? And discussion surfaced from that, and we decided since people had opinions, we might as well put a talk, a panel about it. So we're going to use that as the topic for the Austin Rails meetup in the end of the month. And Scott, myself, and Justin and Ollie were the people who contributed, and Ashley. So to not make it like four dude and a girl.
I don't even make it to, like, we have 2 work Slacks. I don't even make it to my other work Slacks. I'm very impressed. People who make it to, like...
Right. But so definitely trying to get more people involved and somebody, just not just the regular folk who were, you know, vocal enough to talk in the Slack to participate in this panel. So that's the whole idea.
Scott's already doing it. I'll let him have that space.
All right.
Let my team...
We have one representative.
Yes.
How are things going otherwise?
Good. You know, it's almost 2 years. It's almost 2 years into the acquisition, and it is amazing that it is still like we are still slowly becoming like the rest of the company. Like you feel like, oh, we'd be done by it, but it's like just takes so long for like the culture shift to change, and every day I find out like, you want me to do what? Like, okay, let's figure out how to do that and keep everyone happy and keep everyone on board, and you know, like there's a lot of transition through that process from like nimble startup to a small part of a very big corporate environment. I mean, not very big corporate, medium big, but it seems very big to us.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And it can definitely, you know.
You're
if the culture is right and easy to move towards, there wouldn't be such a long process to do. But anytime it becomes bigger and tedious and laborious and all that kind of stuff, you're like, do I have to really?
Honestly, yeah. And if we just sort of like overnight went like, okay, this is the new way, like the whole team would have quit. So, I'm glad.
Pretty much.
We are taking it very slowly, but yeah. Certainly, after Aaron left, I took his spot. I mean, not directly. I mean, no one's going to call me CTO in a big company, but it's been great for my career. But it's just like my focus is that like there are 12 people I want to keep happy. That's my number one focus.
I don't know how you do that, but that's quite a nice challenge, I think. Obviously, depending on your personality, what you sign up for, and if you wanted that responsibility or not. But I hope that the people you get to interact with at the top level are trying to make you happy as well.
I hope so too.
But yeah, so how many? 12 people?
13 including me.
That's quite a number.
Yeah.
They should all show up here every now and then. Wow.
5 of us total? That's pretty good.
Once?
Well, we work in the domain. It's hard. Traffic. I know. Life is complicated.
Is Monday one of the days you have to, or there's no designated day where you have to show up there? Is it now every day?
Well, some people go to the office almost every day. Scott goes to the office almost every day. Coy goes to the office every day. I'm in the office every day. Scott sometimes works from home on Friday, but he's in the office most days. Darnie comes 3 or 4 days a week, but a bunch of the team only comes on Monday and Thursday.
Okay.
So like Monday and Thursday are like heavy meetings. Yeah. And then like Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday are like heads down. Which is actually, when we started doing that, it's been really interesting in terms of like people do get some uninterrupted like heads down time, like having this like in the office day and at home days, like kind of provides like an interesting like back and forth.
I'm doing sort of something like that where Mondays and Fridays are Captain Factory days, which is my office. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I try as much as possible to be at home, so heads down. But it still gets taken over by remote calls and whatnot every now and then. But I try to at least like Wednesday, Thursday, like no interruption, please. I want to like actually
you get some time and
you need that, and it's quite interesting. I mean, trying to, we always talk about meetings, but I'm trying to find a solution for them, and there's no other way.
The other thing though is like, there's times you have to collaborate. It's not even meetings, so like, people will be like, oh, I've got, this and this and this on my plate. And this one I really want to sit down with so-and-so because they're going to be able to give me a good idea. So like, okay, so it's Wednesday, I'm going to knock out this one. I know I'm going to talk to so-and-so about this on Thursday, get a good start on it, and then Friday I can be heads down again. Do you know what I'm saying? Like people kind of plan their work around, like I can collaborate when I'm in the office, and then I can like focus when I'm working.
Teams usually, other than developers, who's part of your nucleus of the team?
So there's like the small product management team we work with, which is like 3 people and a designer. And then like the rest of Academic Works has been like pulled out, so like our support is like way up with all their support people. Everyone's like sort of pulled apart. But like we still socially keep in touch with them, but we don't like actually interact with them anymore. But I'm reporting up to like a woman who like manages a number of managers in Austin. So that is actually like once that change was made, and we weren't reporting up through like old Academic Works management, but reporting up into other engineering, it like gave me other people to collaborate with. Like other people would be like, how do you do this with your team? How does this work? Share ideas with us. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Do you have have you like gathered enough information, enough like sort of thought that you have like, okay, I know how you should do this if you're ever in this kind of situation again. Like, have you come up with sort of like a strategy or
With like how you should deal with acquisitions?
well, acquisition, expanding of a team, and collaborating across sort of multiple, typically would be siloed teams.
Yeah, no, I don't have any. I don't have any like one-off solutions for this. I'm still like feel like I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be an interesting talk someday if you ever come up with like, hey, listen, these are the lessons learned from my experience type of thing. You get to share that with other people. Because I think that would be valuable.
Yeah. I'll think. Let's see. Let me get to a point where I can reflect. And maybe I'll do something.
Why not?
Yeah, like we've definitely worked really hard to like maintain some of our culture within this, but still try to get like also our engineers meeting other people outside of our team, because one of the advantages is there's more people to collaborate, not directly collaborate with because we're working on different problem set and projects and stuff, but like share ideas with and learn from and stuff. And so there's been like this interesting like, I want y'all all to like go out and hang out with all these other engineers here now that there's more engineers, but on the other hand, like we have our like little culture that we want to keep too.
Is the rest of the company here in Austin, or?
There's a big chunk in Austin. The headquarters are in Charleston, so that's like the biggest office, and now Austin's the second biggest office. There's probably there's probably like 70-ish engineers outside of us, maybe a little less, but probably in the Austin office. And then there's also like a big ops department of like DBAs and stuff, and we interact less with them. But certainly there's like a much wider range of like technical folks, but most of them aren't on our tech stack.
Right.
Like,
but still, it's nice to feel like you're part of a company, of a group that maybe you can socialize with at some point. You have some sort of company event or whatever.
So there's certainly like a balance of like one of the advantages is there's a whole lot more technical people to work with. Go meet them all, learn from them. But then at the same time, we still have our own little learning activities and our own little things because we kind of want to be our own little special group.
And you think your product and your stack would not be replaced, right? Like you feel like it's going to go on for a while with this stack, and you won't be co-opted by the other teams.
So we are building out. We've changed our front end to sort of look a little more like the rest of the company's front end, and then they have an Angular front end, like components built in Angular that like we kind of put together a spa, so everybody's stuff looks all the same. So we will be using that, like we're just starting using that to sort of change our front end to look and act more like the rest of the company's front end. So there's that change in tech stack. But no, I'm not rewriting 7 years worth of back end. Like, no. If someone asked me to, I'd be like, peace out.
That's, I feel like the intelligent thing would be to not do it, but I feel like I've heard so many stories where companies have done that because they've been acquired. They're like, okay, we need to merge the tech stacks and we can't have two.
Yeah, that would be something I'd leave over. But what I would say is, I don't think it's happening anytime soon because we can move faster where we are. But if someone said like, hey, we want like new, like when y'all start like a new service or new product or something like that, build it in this tech stack, I would be more open to those discussions. Right. But I'm not leading a rewrite. I'm out. I'm out if they want rewrite.
And what's the typical stack on the other end? Like, is it?
So in Charleston, they're .NET. That is also a deal breaker. In Austin, they're Java. So,
not a deal breaker?
Not as much as .NET.
Really?
You think so?
For me, both of them are a deal breaker.
Yeah. I think I'd rather. Well, so I feel like at least in terms of like myself and my team, Java is something that there's like lots of jobs for, and I'm sure there's lots of jobs for .NET, but not in Austin. Like it's not like.
Yeah, no, I know, but
And so I don't want to take my team, like, first of all, like, you're going to have to do this huge backtrack to learn anything. You might as well learn a skill that's like...
yeah, I mean, if you said Elixir, I would say maybe that's useful, right? No, I would resist it, but you know,
I don't, yeah.
right? But Java, I'm like, nah, like no way. I'm not. It's about me, not whether there's future Java. Like I would not want to do it. Right?
We have started building some stuff in Elixir, and that plan was in place before the acquisition even. And so, like, we started pulling out a couple services that we want to speed up or whatever in Elixir. So yeah, we're using Elixir for a couple things. Not most of our development, but
who gets the honors to work on that?
Chris Mataro mostly.
I don't know if I remember him.
He doesn't meet up. He doesn't do meetups and stuff very well. He's really bright. He's really fast, and he's like a thorn in my side, but all of those things. You know, like he's great. He's like, yeah. So, anyways, yeah.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, I will try to do a better job of coming more often.
We need that, you know, people who've been here before to show up again. Something.
It's hard to get downtown in this city. It's hard to like. Ugh. And Monday's better than Thursday for getting downtown. Like there's less traffic. I feel like on Monday. By Thursday night, I was exhausted. Just like let me go home.
Yes, I know. that's why I do it on Monday and Tuesday, not Thursday or Friday. Nobody wants to show up these days, of course. I don't blame you.
But AOR is on
Tuesday.
Tuesdays? Has it always been Tuesdays? I thought it was Thursdays.
No, Tuesday.
What am I thinking used to be on Thursdays that I went to? I don't know. Anyways. Hey.
Heading
I'll
out?
let you chat around.
You're heading out?
No.
No, you're not here. You're heading back.
Carry my bag around. Sounds like you figured out how to talk. Yeah, that worked out.
Good job. I don't like that one. That's 2 weeks. Thank you for that survey. We need to come up with that survey. I didn't say we would do that.
There's a lot of them.
Do you have?
What's so good? It's like
I wasn't kidding about the fact that I've been talking about this with a friend. She's been debating whether she would join Facebook or not.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about it for more than a month.
I'll let you know.
Like, should she or should she not?
Right.
And she's in Dubai, like there's no other, there's not a lot of options.
Right. That's wild. Yeah.
So,
Not everything.
no, but she would be selling the book. She would be pretty much selling the product. When you work at Facebook, you're selling it. No matter what you do, even if it's like what you got, you're
The
selling
dev gods will surely take
whether you're doing it or not, you're doing it, you're selling the Facebook brand, right? And once the Facebook brand is, you trust that brand, so that you pay money for ads, right? And eventually with most of these things, account sales for companies. Like she would be dealing with companies in East and North Africa, selling the